Well, that's the kind of seamless introduction we love here at the Rec Poker Podcast. If you're hearing my voice, you know it's a Forums edition. I'm Jim Reed, Bluffsterini in the home game, and at Jim in the Forums. I'm joined by the panel as always. We're out here trying to bust each other in the Rec Poker home game and talking a little poker strategy along the way. Chris, why don't you tell us where we can meet you?
I'm Chris Jones. I'm 5x5 on PokerStars, Twitter, and in the forums.
And I'm John Somsky. I'm Poker Geek MN everywhere.
And I'm Rob Washam. I'm Rabman50 everywhere.
See, I really should have just made my handle the same everywhere because I love the way you guys get to just roll that out. It sounds so easy and convenient, but you know, we're not all as smart as you guys, John and Rob. We're learning. We're coming for you. We're closing the gap. One of the folks closing the gap with us this week, Eric Jin, was kind enough to join us for one more week in our Forums edition. Eric is a great poster, always brings some interesting hands to discuss. And Eric, why don't you tell the crowd at home where they can find you in the home game and in the forums here?
This is Eric Jen. I am Binkley on the Rec.Poker forums and COM Binkley in the home games.
Well, thanks for joining us tonight, Eric. We are going to be talking about a hand. The post is called Missing Value and Making Mistakes. It's by @ARW, whose name you hear here from time to time because he's an epic poster. And we love talking about the hands that ARW brings. So I'll just run us through the action here. This is at the 5,100 level of a tournament. ARW is sitting there with King of Diamonds, 10 of Spades, with about 5,000 chips. So not short, there's still some action here. And ARW rather raises min raise to 200, the button calls, and the big blind calls. So we're three-way. The flop comes King of Clubs, 10 of Clubs, 2 of Spades, and it goes check, check, check. So ARW chooses to check the 2 pair there. We'll get into that action in a bit. What's interesting is the turn comes the 9 of Clubs. So King of Clubs, 10 of Clubs, 2 of Spades, 9 of Clubs. So there's a straight, there's a flush, the big blind checks, ARW checks 2 pair again, and the villain on the button bets 600 into 1150. The big blind folds, and the question is what to do now. So we basically have 4 options as ARW lays out. We can fold, we can call the 600, we can raise to about 2,000, which would be about half the effective stack, or we could raise all in. And we could quibble over the sizing of the third option there, but I think a non-all-in size. And the other information that ARW says, as played, I have no idea why I didn't bet the flop or the turn with 2 pair. I was likely distracted. And in the past, I've compounded my mistake in this spot. During the hand, ARW says they notice that they're playing in a weird line where they likely missed value, and then they decide to go and try and make up for that missed value by betting or raising when they shouldn't. So the question is, how should we proceed at this point? So, I mean, top 2 pair on the flop seems like a monster. And yeah, I think it probably plays better as an aggressive action on the flop is played, but it's a very interesting spot when that turn comes in and it sort of brings the world. What are you guys thinking when you're in that position?
In the past, I've definitely had the same issue about trying to catch up. You know, oh, I should have bet this on the flop, so I'll bet twice as much here. But what you really end up doing is you just basically ensure that you're going to lose the maximum because you're pricing everyone that you're beating out. So chances are they aren't going to call you unless, you know, they're just a horrible player. And if they are calling you, you very well may not have the best hand anymore. So it makes it, you just have to kind of pretend like you timed out and for some reason you woke up and now here's the hand in front of you and get the value that's appropriate at this exact moment in time.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think the value that's in front of us here is that we have a a hand that's really marginal at this point. It's not. It's a good hand. I think it'd be a mistake to fold it, but it would be a mistake, I think, to raise it as well. I think this is a hand we should be calling. Um, our opponent, we want to keep the hands that our opponent, now that we've checked twice, two players have checked twice to this button. Now that we've done that, I think button is probably making this stab. We want to keep these kind of hands in there with, and yes, they can get there, right? They can have jacks, they can have single clubs, they can have, a lot of those hands that we're well ahead of. Even the single pair hands might be betting this after 2 checks, but we want to keep those hands in there. I think this is to me, this is a pretty clear call, and then see where we land. I mean, I think I agree. We should have taken an earlier action probably on this flop, maybe even this turn. But now that we're here, I think this is a pretty clear call.
Yeah, if we raise, we've turned our 2-pair hand into a bluff, basically. So we can call easily. I mean, there are other weaker 2 pairs that, button could be betting. And also, even if we are behind, we could, get a good river that fills us up, and now we're ahead. So, yeah, raising just pushes out weaker hands and only gets called by stronger or stronger draws.
And I think there are some 1-card draws in that range there, where there's the 3 straight and the 3 flush on the turns, especially when it's gone check all the way to the button on both streets. I mean, they really should be firing there with a lot of non-made hands, honestly, because it's scary, and people haven't had a chance to, people have not taken up their own chance to threaten the pot. So you want them to be able to either give up, like, because what you really want to do is get to showdown, right? Like, that's really what you want to do. You want to get your 2-pair to showdown as cheaply as possible on the rare rivers where you don't get that other king or 10, because that does come every once in a while, and you've been the one with the straight or the flush when that boats up on the river, for sure. And yeah, I think it makes sense that raising here is like a panic raise. It's like, oh wait, I thought I had this hand under control, and now this terrible turn has come, and I must protect my hand. And I think it's that attitude that John's talking about, and ARW does mention in here about making up for it. And I think Chris really said it best. You have your decision is the one decision that's in front of you now. You have to make a decision that's based on as played, the action as it is, make good assumptions right now, and make the best decision you can for the hand in front of you at the moment. And I think this is the same way about chip stacks. If you have 50 big blinds and you're entering a hand, it shouldn't matter if you used to have 25 big blinds and you just doubled up, or you used to have 100 big blinds and someone just took half your chips. It's the same hand. It's the same decision you have to make. The factors are the same. What happened right before is not a mathematically relevant factor to the decision that you have to make. It's harder to do in these spots mid-hand, because you feel like on the flop, I mean, in my case, if I check behind there, it's because I feel like I own this hand. Like, I don't have to protect it anymore. And another thing that's interesting, ARW says, maybe I was just distracted. And that's a real thing. I play online a lot more than I play live, and I am not always paying 100% attention to it every minute. I know some of us are playing the home game right now as we talk about this, but distractions do happen, and especially if you're going to be playing while you do other stuff, or you're multi-tabling, have a strategy for that. And the strategy shouldn't be to just freak out on the turn and put more chips in, which is not what ARW is advocating here. But so short answer, I agree. I think it plays best as a call.
Two things I'd add to that. First of all, I want to give credit where credit's due. And John was the one who had all the wisdom about that, not me. So hopefully this part of my second part of my statement is the wisdom part. But that is that I think that sometimes we might have that feeling. Like I've been in this situation too, where I either think I've got an aggressive opponent on a flop like this, or I think I've got this so locked up that I'm going to check and see if somebody will bet behind me and see if I can get some more money in this pot. And then it doesn't go that way, right? And it checks around, and then some obvious like card comes. It's like, oh, God, that changes the entire dynamic of the flop. But I would argue that this is the type of hand that we should still be, even on this turn, we should be betting, like leading out rather than waiting, because I think we would have probably heard from most club combinations, possibly not from, but I think possibly not from the big blind. Big blind could still have some club combinations and check twice, but it seems it's less likely. And so this is a turn that sometimes you see that scary card after you've tried to get sneaky on a flop, and then you come to the turn and it's like, dang it, now I got this card come, and then you check again. And I think that's a big mistake. I think that this is a turn where we should be leading a lot, and are often, I think we're often still ahead.
Yeah, we don't know what ARW's position is. We know it's before the button, obviously. I don't know if he raised from early position, but keep in mind that on the pre-flop, he just got 2 calls. He raised and got 2 calls. Now it was a mid-raise, but he just raised and got 2 calls. So we're not looking at a hugely strong, necessarily a strong hand. When the big blind checks and then ARW checks on the flop, I would think somebody with an ace high club draw may be throwing out a bet on there on the button. And again, this is all villain dependent. We always say, right? It's villain dependent, but I would look at that when it gets checked around all the way to the button on the turn, that he could be making a stab with just about anything. Weaker 10 or a weaker king, he could be making a stab with a 10, with a 9. He could have a pair of 8s. He could have all kinds of stuff. He could have a flush draw right now with the ace of clubs. Have a ace 8 type of hand that he's just making a stab at it. So I don't necessarily put the button on a very strong hand when he does this action. So a call is definitely warranted here. Again, you don't want to raise and then get re-raised and then have to, because the only hand that's going to re-raise you is one that's got you beat. So keeping the pot small as best you can, out of position, just making a call here and see what progresses on the river.
Yeah, I like that. And I think it's important that Rob points out that it's a calling range from the button that we're really worried about here. And when the turn comes king, 10, 9, a lot of that range has a pair plus draw there. There's a lot of 10 jack, well, not jack queen, that would be a pretty good one, but king jack, 10 queen. There's a lot of those like middle Broadway that didn't make the 3-bet, but they've got a pair, or maybe they've got like a pair plus draw, or they're 2 pair here. So I think there's a range that you can value target here effectively with your top 2 pair. And so I think betting the turn, even though it looks terrible, there's something to that, as long as you are planning for those terrible river cards that come, and understanding that every once in a while they're going to have a straight or a flush, but a lot of the time, by a long shot, they're going to have a 1 pair hand with a draw, or a 2 pair hand that's worse than yours. So I think that's a really good point. We do get some other commenters in here. TV Stensby says he would turn his 2 pair into a bluff catcher here. Without a read on the villain, I would assume that he stabs often enough that calling down is profitable. And check folding river only when the river card connects with the board and the villain bets big, which that's not going to be every time. It's basically low red cards what you're rooting for. And then ace rag off, who I always want to call Acer Rigoff, because I think he's a golfer, and so I see the ace, and I think like,
It's Ace Ragoff.
oh, it's definitely Ace Ragoff. No,
Yeah, this is Dan. That's Dan.
yeah, he's a fun guy too.
Yep.
Oh yeah, Adam. And he
I
says,
used to work with him.
oh really? Oh,
Yeah.
that's great.
We worked
Cool.
at the same place.
He's been in the home games quite a bit too.
Yep.
He's a fun.
Oh, he won
Fun guy.
a TOC too. We had him on the
That's right. We got a chance
Yep.
to get the live replay.
Exactly. Yeah.
That was fun. That was fun. So Ace Ragoff here says that I can understand a check on the flop, but as seen by the turn, super coordinated board and prefers a bet. And yeah, he's got some other good candidates out there that you can get calls from. So yeah, well, I got really, the thing that I really want to talk about was this sort of catching up or making up for it on a later street, which is something that I fall prey to all the time. And I think the real key is that poker is just a series of these isolated decision points, and you have to factor in everything that's happened so far, but that doesn't mean that you have to just like continue with the plan that you think would have been a good plan if things had gone differently.
Yeah, I think one of those cases that's most common is when you're planning a check raise and then your opponent doesn't oblige you by continuation betting or whatever the case may be. And it's so frustrating, especially if it's a very coordinated board like this case, and then the flush comes on the turn and now you don't know what you should do because the hand that you had that was the nuts, like let's say you flop top set, now what are you going to do with it? And that's one of the hardest things I have a problem with, because you almost at that point feel entitled to the pot and you feel entitled to the big pot. Well, the cards don't know that. So when they start coming, you just have to react to reality, not what your expectation of what it should have been.
Oh, it sounds like there's a life lesson there, John.
No, that is very well said, because I think a lot of people tend to get that feeling that they're entitled to this pot because of the hand that they had on the flop or the hand that they had pre-flop. Obviously, if you have aces, you're going to win the hand, right? Well,
every time.
I'm here to tell you, it doesn't always happen.
Yeah, I think that's a great example, John, because it is that check raise opportunity comes up all the time, and you think, oh, they've got to bet this, right? Like if just like Eric was mentioning on an earlier episode, you're projecting onto them that you would be c-betting here all the time, and so surely they will, and then they don't, and you feel like you're owed this bet that should have gone into the pot there, and so you're going to have to get it now on this later street, and the fact is, the board has changed. So, I mean, part of that you can combat by hand selection, by choosing, well, it's certain check raise spots, maybe you want to play that as a donk instead, maybe you just have a note on this villain. We talk about this hashtag villain dependent all the time. And I think we should probably shout out to Merv Harvey from the Post Flop Poker podcast, because I think I stole the hashtag villain dependent from Merv. So Merv, if you're listening,
yeah, you did.
I think that sounds right. Yeah, it's a compliment. It's the most sincere and highest form of flattery, Merv. So you're all the way across the world. Let you know you've got some love here on the Rec Poker podcast, Merv. Thank you for that. And yeah, villain dependent, especially when it comes to this kind of post flop stuff. I think it really helps to know who you're playing against, because people play different ranges very differently post-flop, and you can sort of get by pre-flop on just being sound and mathematically consistent yourself. But if you want to get really into post-flop poker, then it helps to know the people you're playing against. But I'll always say check raise more. You should always just check raise more if you have the opportunity. Sometimes the world doesn't oblige. All right. Well, any other comments on missing value, making mistakes, check raising, that kind of thing? Doesn't sound like it. So without any further ado, I'll thank our wonderful sponsors, website AMP, Learn Pro Poker, and Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino. Holy cow, guys, we did it! Eric, Rob, Chris, John, thanks for talking poker with me, guys. We'll see you next week.